all anybody can talk about today is AI. In fact, it's so prevalent that I didn't know how to follow that statement up because that's all folks do talk about. Apple themselves are releasing their version called Apple Intelligence later on this year, but unfortunately, it won't work with all existing Apple products. So today, let's build the absolute cheapest holistic ecosystem that will still let you allegedly increase your productivity with all sorts of large language model-y goodness. For starters, what even is Apple Intelligence? Well, according to Apple, it's AI for the rest of us that will help us get to write, express ourselves, and get things done effortlessly. Boiled down, this will come in a couple of flavors. The Copilot, which will embed itself into existing programs and give assistance in the use of that program, texting, summarizing documents, assisting with tones and emails, which okay, I personally sometimes need help toning down the surliness in my communication, so probably good news for me. Another way this will manifest is more capability for Siri as an intelligent, voice-driven assistant, and for when you want to talk to a program that just is like a version of that friend who always thinks they're right, they'll embed ChatGPT just straight up into their newest operating system. We'll have to see if this Apple-flavored AI is actually useful, but I'm kind of hopeful for a few key features they've announced, namely cleaning up my handwriting on my iPad. It's pretty dire. To use all of this fun futuristic tech, we've got to pretty narrowly define and seek out devices that have the oomph to make this possible. And there is a list you can see on Apple's website of all the devices that will work with Apple Intelligence. So let's start off with the hub of any good ecosystem, the cell phone. And it is, honestly, this is the device that is used the most in any setups that anybody makes. Here it is kind of an easy choice, because there is no choice. Apple Intelligence will only work on the latest iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max with the A17 Pro processor. Now, I say that there's not a lot of choice, but I might throw something as a fourth dimensional curveball at you. Apple Intelligence won't be released until later this fall, which is also probably right around the time of the next iPhone lineup. If that holds true, the cheapest way into Apple AI may be to wait for the iPhone 16, because if pricing models hold true, that should be around $799. But if you're somebody that you gotta have your hands on your ecosystem today, just waiting to click upgrade, the best way into the ecosystem today that I was able to find was an iPhone 15 Pro renewed on Amazon for about $830. That will come with the latest A17 Pro processor, 128 gigabytes of storage, and one of, their assortment of shockingly nice looking colors. I like boring colors, so they are right up my alley. You'll also get a 6.1-inch Super Retina XDR display and one of the best camera systems in the business. You may have noticed in my hand, though, I personally use the Pro Max version, which is a little bigger, but most of the parts are identical, and the cameras on this lineup are phenomenal. I haven't even bothered bringing my big cameras anywhere. Family trips, kid music concerts, anything. I just don't bring them anymore because the capabilities here, they are awesome. And frankly, this might still be the best way to go overall because it's not much more expensive than a standard iPhone, but the Pro lineup is generally way more powerful and gets way more features than even the next generation standard model. So you get more features for roughly the same price, meaning cheaper. That's what cheaper means, right? Okay, next up in the overall AI ecosystem, we do get a little more choice, which means a little more digging. You may notice a trend here from this point on in the video, where devices need to have an M1 or later equivalent processor to run Apple AI. So for the iPad of the system, we could go with a Pro or an Air, either M1, M2, or M4 in the case of the iPad Pro. We're talking cheapest still, so I won't recommend my beloved M4 iPad Pro. What I will recommend for inclusion is the M1 iPad Air, released back in 2022. This is not it. I actually have my M1 iPad Air, uses my teleprompter right now. I did find this in a couple of places. You could get this brand new from Best Buy for about $499. Apple Pencil compatibility, M1 processor, the whole shebang for under $500. Which isn't too bad. But if you want to save even more, you could go open box from Best Buy and get it for around $436. $70 less means more money for accessories. And who does not love a glamorized tablet? The guy that makes a bunch of iPad accessory videos loves a I mean, look at this. I can't even set this here without giving it an accessory. You could also get this open box from Micro Center for around $479 and renewed from Amazon for about $426 as the absolute cheapest option. You may have noticed in all of these videos that I use generalities and vague statements when I'm talking about online retailer prices because they have a habit of changing after I make a video, so it's hard to be concrete on how much each of these parts is going to cost. Of the three purchasing choices, I would probably go either brand new or open box from Best Buy. Brand new does give you the ability to buy Apple Care if you are rough on tech, and You know, while it's not the cheapest, it might not be a bad investment. I wasn't going to do this, but I did a little digging after doing the iPad Air research, and you could alternatively get an M1 iPad Pro for not much more. I found a renewed iPad Pro for $529, and while the iPad Air and the iPad Pro have roughly the same basic functionality, it's not like the iPhone and the iPhone Pro. The iPad Pro just looks better. It has better accessory support, it has a faster refresh display. It's not something that I would recommend paying hundreds of dollars extra to get, but $30 extra, that probably makes it a worthwhile option. Next up is the Mac, the most mature platform, i.e. it's had the M1 and up processor the longest, which means it's going to take a little more sleuthing and maybe a little more nuance to say which is the cheapest, but also which of those cheapest makes the most sense for you. I think we can safely remove the Pros and the Studios from our search, as they are definitely not the cheapest. And I think we have to further delineate by looking at 3 different use cases that will all have a cheapest option inside of them. Number 1, you travel for work or you are a student moving to and from classes and you don't want to use that iPad for note-taking, which is valid. In this instance, I would say go with the M1 MacBook Air as the cheapest option. You can find them for crazy low prices, for about $500 from Amazon, Best Buy, or Micro Center. For that money, you get a full functioning Apple laptop with a very high standard for build quality. Battery life to this day, better than anything on the Windows side. Power that is also still better than some Windows ARM computers, and just a whole host of benefits. Seriously, the M1 MacBook Air might be the single most useful laptop ever made, and thankfully, it should still run Apple AI later this year. Second use case, you only work at home, or you just want a home computer, and you already have all of the peripherals that go along with that computer. In this case, I would say go with the M1 Mac Mini. You get all of those great things that I said about the MacBook Air, but even more so. This has an internal fan that barely ever runs, but it exists, and it keeps you from having any thermal throttling issues. It also has both Thunderbolt, but also an HDMI port, making this a rare M1 processor computer that can export out to 2 displays at the same time. You also get the slightly higher end M1 processor with the 8-core GPU standard here, where you would have to pay extra for that with the MacBook Air. All of those are great, right? But the cherry on top is, I found one of these brand new from Micro Center for $399. For context, that's the cheapest thing on this cheapest list, and it's the home computer. You'd think that the phone and the computer would be swapped, but dang, I guess not. Yes, it's easy as YouTubers, and we have financial incentive to get overly excited and to speak in extremes for engagement's sake, but straight-faced as possible, I can't even do that. This is the best deal you're going to find on a computer. Not for an Apple computer, not for a cheapest computer, but overall, you will not get better than this. But for that third use case, let's say you do want a strictly home computer, but you don't have all the accoutrement to make it work. In this case, I would say the M1 iMac makes a whole lot of sense because it's basically a whole home desktop PC in a box, or in a all-in-one. I mean, it does come in a box. All of the previous statements hold up here, except much like the MacBook Air, there are 2 models. One with the 7-core GPU and one with the 8-core GPU. Will you be able to tell a difference between the 2? No, probably not. Well, okay, not unless you are a YouTuber that specializes in benchmarks and making sweeping statements with those benchmarks that actually don't affect real use cases. This one was a little harder to run down, but I was able to find a refurbished model at Micro Center for $679. This is the one with the 8-core GPU. For context, because this comes with a built-in display and an included keyboard and mouse, that means if you compare it directly to the Mac Mini for price, you'd have to find a high-quality keyboard, display, and mouse for $280 to match that capability. I'm not saying you couldn't do that, but it's going to be much harder to get a display on the caliber that the iMac has for that money. Okay, so we've got a ton of components and a ton of options, but what does the cheapest Apple AI ecosystem set us back? We've got $830 for a refurbished iPhone 15 Pro, $426 for a renewed iPad Air, and $399 for a Mac Mini. This brings us to a grand total of $1,655. Okay, yes, that's not cheap. I'm not going to say that that's cheap, but for comparison, that is cheaper than a current MacBook Pro 14. So you get all of the capability of this Apple tech, and you get Apple AI, and it costs less than just a standard MacBook. Obviously, you could scale this down even more if you want to save more money. Maybe you just want one device with Apple AI and you don't need everything. But what about you? Are you getting any additional tech to get ready for Apple AI? Let us all know in the comments below. And if you like this video, click here to see the cheapest overall Apple ecosystem that you can buy. Click. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.